Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Vetting America. I'm your host, Adam T. Cummings, and today's show features guest Dr. Carol Rasor, who spent 25 years in the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and retired as a captain. She's currently president of Transformational Strategies and Solutions, while also a new board member of Veterans Counseling Veterans, which is a nonprofit aimed at helping veterans obtain the mental health resources needed post-military service. She has begun to work alongside former Vetting America guest Colonel Tony Williams, who founded the organization a couple years back. I'm honored to have you all join us today on this beautiful day in downtown Tampa. And if possible, please like and share this interview so that more veterans can learn about what Dr. Rasor's doing in our community. Before we get going, I would love to give a shout out to our sponsors, Anthony Kovic of the Tampa Post, my executive producer, Angel Francisco of S Marketing, and Attic Cafe for hosting us today. So let's jump right into it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Adam. And if you'll give me the opportunity, I want to thank you for your service as a U.S. Marine.
Thank you so much.
You've done so much for us, as well as your other Marine companions.
Yes.
And thank them too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I want to jump right into your time in the sheriff's office, because oftentimes we talk about veteran health, veteran mental health, but first responder mental health is a big issue right now in this country as well.
Yes.
First responder community has the highest rate of suicide of basically all communities right now, correct?
Correct.
So, what was your 25-year career like, and what were some trends you noticed in your first responder community?
Well, serving as a police officer or deputy sheriff, one of the things with that type of job, it parallels the military, but it's probably not as intense on a day-to-day level as military during wartime, but you are exposed to some of the same things and experiences, and also always that threat of your life at risk. And it could be unexpectedly. And that is true, Adam, that with first responders, the suicides now are higher than the line of duty deaths. And that says a lot in itself.
Absolutely. What were some of the organizations and task forces that you spearheaded?
Well, at the sheriff's office, I started the domestic violence unit and also the sexual predator and offender unit. I was a member of the hostage negotiation team. I worked in patrol, crimes against children, economic crimes, community service, training, court security.
How were all of these experiences and all of this wisdom, basically, by being in different groups, different communities, seeing different sides of our communities, how has that helped you now doing what it is you do with Veterans Counseling Veterans and with the other thing you're a part of?
Well, unfortunately, part of a deputy sheriff or a police officer's job is to enforce the Baker Act. I've been to calls for service at houses where the individuals were experiencing mental health issues, and they're from all socioeconomic levels, and they would have to be Baker Acted, which is taken into custody for the 72 hours.
Yes.
What that did for me is to see some of the pain that individuals go through. And I'd also like to share with you that one of the experience I had, in fact, I was a shift commander when this happened, was a young Marine came home from Iraq. And he had torn up his house. He did not hurt his wife or his child or anything, but he broke down in tears, and I had him in the back seat of my cruiser, not under arrest, but we had McDill, we called McDill, and they came and got him and took him to his facility, their facility. That's
really beautiful.
And just to see the pain and some of those things that Marine shared with me, we need to be doing everything we possibly can for our veterans, because they have gone above and beyond the call of duty of what they've been exposed to in probably some of the worst situations, and quite frankly, I don't think they're getting the support that they need.
I agree with you completely. You had a son in the military as well.
Yes.
And what branch did he serve in?
He was in the Marines.
He was in the Marines as well. if you would like to share that story a little bit with the audience and how close of an issue this comes to home for you,
Yes.
I'd be grateful.
This really hits home. My son was Sergeant Joseph Ryan Rasor, and he served in the U.S. Marines. He went into the Marines right out of high school. He went to a Christian high school, and that was just, he wanted to be a Marine so bad and to serve his country. And he was in the 3rd Battalion, 24th Division, is it? And during that time frame, he served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he received many awards for his service. Unfortunately, in April 2017, he committed suicide. It seemed when he got back there was some transition issues. The things I noticed was that, he wasn't quite as at ease as he used to be, and his hearing was very alert too. But he was very functional. He finished his bachelor's degree. He went on and started at USF in a graduate program, and it just, it took me, I was shocked when my own police agency came and woke me up at 3 in the morning to tell me my son had committed suicide. And I knew the officers and they knew me. And but what I'd like to share with you is that I contacted his VA counselor, and I told him that my son had committed suicide. He didn't know. He missed his last appointment. And that's one thing that I'd like to see with mental health care at the VA, is that when they do miss an appointment, send out law enforcement, because we know how to interact and find out why they missed it, and just tell them, hey, can you call your counselor?
Yeah.
Something there
100%.
for a connection, just not waiting for the veteran to call back. And I just think that after talking to the counselor and hearing some of the things that he had been exposed to, while it's so difficult, it gave me a deep understanding of the grief he was facing because of his experiences with the people they served with, seeing the things, losing close friends, losing subordinates, and that's something very difficult to deal with.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The one thing, too, that kind of struck home with me is I asked the counselor, are you a veteran? And he said no. And I understand what degrees do for people. I have a PhD. But sometimes you need to walk in that person's shoes to really understand what they're going through. And I think that's true for first responders too. And that's why Veterans Counseling Veterans is such an important organization, because they are credentialed to serve as counselors, but also they have lived the life of a soldier.
Absolutely. So is this something that prompted you to get into the veteran community?
What happened is, I think that God works in mysterious ways.
When one door closes, another door opens. I truly believe that.
And Tony Williams, the CEO of Veterans Counseling Veterans, saw that my son had died and showed up at the funeral. Wow. I never met him or knew him before, and he didn't know me. And afterwards we got talking, and he said, do you want to get involved? And I said, yeah, I'm all in, whatever you need to do.
Why did you decide to get your PhD in education?
I liked the program at University of South Florida. It taught me a lot of different skills that were useful during law enforcement and after
So
law
you got the
enforcement.
PhD while you were in law enforcement?
Yes.
That's impressive. How were you able to balance being an officer in law enforcement, because that's a whole other beast, and get your PhD at the same time? That's a lot.
Well, I had 2 kids too, and here's the secret. And now that I teach full-time at St. Petersburg College, turn off the TV.
Yep.
You'll be amazed at how much time you have.
Yeah, really, so true. And
Yes.
your brain won't go to mush either,
Yeah.
so that's great. How have you combined your police background with your PhD in order to help organizations become more efficient and effective? Because I was reading your bio, let's talk about some of those organizations that you've been a part of, some of those things you've done across the country. You know, how were you able to leverage your educational background with your police background to start making policy changes and making more effectual moves towards improving these systems that seem to be outdated and maybe even a little archaic?
Well, I work full-time at St. Petersburg College, but I'm also a senior research associate for the Center of Public Safety Management out of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And what we do is we do operational assessments of police agencies to make them more effective.
Wow.
So we have a team of individuals, PhD, and some of them also have law degrees. And a city or the police department will contract us to come in to review every operational aspect of their department, their policies, procedures, their staffing levels, deployment issues, training, and to give them recommendations to strengthen what they do.
Okay. As we know, police force, first responding community has been kind of at the forefront of a lot of controversy over the last 5-6 years.
Yes.
What has it been like to live your entire life in this community and see how it's changed not only in public perception, but maybe even the perception that officers have of themselves? How have you been able to overcome these issues and really try to transcend past them?
I think one of the things that when you hear news reports about police officers, you know, doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Certainly they should be held accountable.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. But people have to remember there's almost 18,000 law enforcement agencies throughout the United States.
Agencies?
Yes.
Wow.
So within that, when you think about statistics, it's a very small amount.
Of course.
With law enforcement, it's much more transparent than a lot of other occupations.
Yes.
There are mistakes made in the medical community by good people, but just made wrong decisions.
Yes.
But that's not as visible to the public.
Absolutely.
Law enforcement is on the front lines, and most agencies, I think, do an excellent job of being very transparent when things go wrong and saying, we own it.
Where do you see your experience and your skill set coming into play to leverage in veteran counseling veterans' mission to pretty much end veteran suicide? Well,
I think my credentials help me in terms of we're going to be doing a forum in May,
okay,
and to work on that, and also to work on any projects that they come along. But I think what's more important than my education is my experience of losing my own son, yes, through suicide. When it hits home,
it'll change
it's
perspective.
Totally different.
Yeah.
I have delivered many death notifications, and while I felt sympathy, which is a feeling, you don't really feel compassion, because compassion is an act. And because my son committed suicide and they came to my house, now I'm in a position where I want to show compassion and act on it,
yes,
not just feel it.
Yes.
And whatever I can do to help veterans counseling veterans or the veterans community, that's my goal.
So let's talk about this forum. We have this faith-based Veterans and Families Suicide Prevention and Post-vention Forum, which you said is coming in the spring, correct?
Yes.
And when is it? So the date is going to be May 18th, 2019, from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And where's it going to be?
Well, we're negotiating
okay,
right now about a location for it. We would probably know in about a week for sure. So please go to Facebook and tune into Veterans Counseling Veterans, because we will be posting the location on there.
All right, perfect.
We're trying to have it in the Pinellas County in the Clearwater area.
Okay, so talk a little bit about it. Like, what's it all about? How's it going to go? How do people find out about it? How do people get involved? Do you need volunteers? Break it down.
Well, this concept of this forum was the brainchild of Tony Williams, our CEO of Veterans Counseling Veterans. And he envisioned, one of the things he says that I think really hits home is that veteran suicide is a national problem with a local solution. And that's what he's trying to accomplish, working through the faith-based communities to become involved. Because when you think about it, they have the infrastructure.
Yes.
They have the volunteers, and they have credentialed people. There's many counselors that either are part of the church paid, or they're volunteers in itself.
Absolutely.
And we want to bring them into the fold to see what sort of resources can we leverage outside of the government to help veterans. Because quite honestly, from my perspective, is the VA doesn't seem like they're making any progress on suicide prevention or intervention, and unheard of post-vention. After a soldier or veteran kills themselves and they're separated, there's a big difference from when they're still in the military.
Oh, it's completely
the support
different.
that they get. My son was out of the military then, and I stood alone. There was no help.
Wow, yes.
And just to tell you that the difficulties, and if I can share with you please. Because he died out in Oregon. He had property there. He had property here. I had to get probate attorneys. I had to have his body transported back here, hook into the church he used to be with, plan a funeral, which unfortunately there was another member of the church that she lost her son in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
And she gave me guidance and helped me with the funeral. And she said to me, Carol, it's like planning the biggest wedding in 3 days.
Yes.
And it's unbelievable, and it's expensive.
It's very expensive.
And the military doesn't pay for anything but the tombstone at Bushnell. I was in a different position because myself and Joe's father financially could handle it. But I don't know what some of these young couples do, or mothers and fathers that are from maybe socioeconomic levels where they don't have the resources and they stand alone.
Yes.
And we've got to change that.
Yes.
And Veterans Counseling Veterans, one of the programs that we need volunteers for is our suicide post-vention efforts.
Yes.
Which is Veterans and Families Outreach for Suicide Support.
It's at the VFOS, right?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
So if we have anyone out there, veterans or civilians, that's willing to help out either with their time, talents, or their money, we'd like for them to get involved.
So is VFOS a part of Veterans Counseling Veterans? And again, VFOS stands for Veterans and Families Outreach Support for Suicide Survivors. So this is more post-vention. And you have VCV is more like prevention. So together you guys are kind of combining forces to cover both ends.
The whole spectrum.
Okay, yes. Are you guys two different organizations coming together to work together?
No, it's a program under Veterans Counseling Veterans.
Perfect. Okay, talk about that a little bit.
Well, the unique approach of Veterans Counseling Veterans, and once again, this was the brainchild of Tony Williams, was to do the entire spectrum. You hear a lot about prevention, you hear about intervention, but no one addressed post-vention. And I can guarantee you there's very few organizations that are willing to go down that road.
Yes.
And Veterans Counseling Veterans is willing to do that. And what we're looking at is, what we'd like to establish is that when there is a suicide of a veteran's, more than likely, 99.9% of the time, it's going to involve law enforcement responding to the call.
Very true.
We'd like to set up a team that could respond to those calls. We'd be contacted by law enforcement saying there's a suicide of a veteran, and to assist the family to navigate and to be able to take care of some of the issues, whether first off planning the funeral, finding a church, because that can be challenging in itself, looking at also other needs that they may have, and we need actually some support from the community for this.
Yes, 100%. What are some ways you guys plan on kind of invoking this and drawing awareness to it and building up the reputation so that veterans know that this is a resource that you can use?
Well, what we'd like to do is get the infrastructure in place. And what we need is, one of the things that really stands out that's difficult is when the veteran commits suicide and he or she is separated from the military, they are on their own pretty much for the funeral expenses. We need to work on that piece because that's a difficult situation for people, because I know my own son's funeral was $16,000.
Yes.
That's not something that you
It's not
can
a drop in
just...
the bucket.
Right.
Yeah.
And funeral costs are expensive,
Very.
whether it's cremation or the traditional. And so we have to align ourselves too and reach out and find some funeral homes that's willing to work with us.
That's brilliant, actually. I want to get into the psychology now a little bit aspect. It's one of my, personally, I love psychology, and I really like to talk about why it is that things happen from a standpoint of understanding, so that we're not pushing judgments on the people, but we're truly trying to get to the bottom of happenstances that occur during life. You served 25 years in the police force. There had to have been some sort of transition for you. Did you have any trouble transitioning out of the police force and starting a life now as a civilian again, where you no longer have your identity? You don't have that. You're not a captain anymore. You don't have that uniform you get to put on every day. How were you able to transition out of that and kind of step into the role that you've become today?
Well, Adam, it's true. There's a lot of similarities between the military and law enforcement with retirement.
Yes.
The difference is that while the military in most cases are serving a shorter period of time, their time in it is probably a little bit more intense than law enforcement. Law enforcement isn't as intense, but it's a longer period of time. You serve 25 years. So you really become ingrained in the culture. And yes, there are transition differences. It's your perception of your role in society, what you did for 25 years serving the public, and then you wake up one morning and what do I do?
Yes, and it doesn't matter as much experience as you had, all the degrees in the world, all this and that. Doubt starts to set in. You start to think, am I capable of doing this? Am I capable of doing anything? What am I without this identity that has helped me cope with everything my entire life, my entire adult life,
right.
And now all of a sudden it's just Carol Rasor.
Yeah. I think that the essential feeling is, where do I fit in? And that's important, I think, from a humanistic level.
We're very tribal,
yes.
Especially being in the military and being, our vibes attract our tribes, and we no longer have one. We're lone wolves for the first time. And from there, it's, what do I do?
And those experiences being in the military, law enforcement, does change you. My daughter says to me, sometimes, Mom, you gotta not use the police voice when you talk to me. And it's true. She makes me catch myself. But that was necessary in law enforcement, to have that firmness.
Transformation.
Yes. It doesn't really work well once you leave.
Yes.
You have to work on a different skill set in communicating with people. You're not giving people orders anymore what to do.
Yes.
You're working with them and beside them.
And that's why when I describe this podcast, I call it, not only is it service, but there's sacrifice to it. And not only was there transition, but there has to be transformation for you to shed who you used to be that was appropriate, and then walk into who you always were meant to be, that's needed out here, and get rid of a lot of those stigmas that you kept back when you were either in the military or the police force. So you have a transitional period, but I also believe in that transitional period, for you to finally truly transcend out of that and build a life out here of success and happiness for yourself, you have to transform yourself. You have to now level up. You can't, there's a lot of veterans out there that kind of hold on to their military experience, and more so where it defines them, not so much kind of propels them. And because of that, they get stuck where, I can't be part of any of these new communities because they're not like the past. They're never going to be like the past. The only way that you can involve yourself in this new community that you're in is if you transform yourself to be able to fit into that community in your own way, still be your authentic self, still carry yourself with pride because you were a veteran, but understand that not everybody thinks the same way you do, not everyone has the same experiences as you do, and as you evolve, that is how you can actually affect change, and especially in your life, so.
I think it's important for people to have mentors.
Yes.
To have someone show them the way. And I think that's one of the things of veterans counseling veterans, is that you have a rich group of people that served in the military that now are professionals in counseling.
Yes.
To contact veterans counseling veterans to give them some guidance on what they need to do, because you are going to feel a transition. That's if you spend intense periods of time or long periods of time, you're going to adapt to that culture.
You will.
And your behaviors will change, your mannerisms sometimes will change too, how you stand,
how you talk,
yes,
words you choose, how you look at someone, everything.
And so it's almost like having an entire change that you have to be willing to accept. That's
Yes.
the starting point, that I have to change. I come with some great experience, whether military and law enforcement, but now it's time for me to change.
So what are some of the biggest gaps that you see veterans counseling veterans going forth in the future addressing in regards to the epidemic of that is veteran and first responder suicide?
Well, I think what you're seeing now is the first responder suicides bubbling up to the surface. Mm-hmm. And you have to consider, too, the numbers with that. Or sometimes you need to look at single car accidents as to whether they were suicides or accidents.
True.
And whether the suicide occurred on duty or off duty and what the circumstances were. Law enforcement is, like the military, a very stressful job, especially now during these times, because while a big proportion of the public is very supportive of law enforcement, there are more vocal critics.
Yes.
Sometimes warranted because of incidents that happen.
Yes.
But a lot of times, maybe a little bit too quick to judge.
Absolutely. And so what are some of the programs that your VCV, Tony Williams, yourself are trying to design to provide our vets and our first responders with the assistance they need?
One of the keys that I think was important is to have counselors that have that veteran experience. Yes. The VA, as I shared with you, my son didn't have a counselor that served in the military. I think it makes a difference.
That makes a complete difference.
And Veterans Counseling Veterans has that ability to understand the clinical aspect, but also understand the experiential, because they were there at one time. Absolutely. Too. I think there needs to be Veterans Counseling Veterans expanded more. Mm-hmm. Those individuals would be great to serve on external board to oversee the VA.
Yes.
And when there's complaints that come in, having an external board that people can contact that aren't paid by the government,
checks and balances,
and that they can share their concerns with the service level.
So what are some ways that veterans and first responders can help themselves during their struggles with mental health issues?
If, once again, similar to the military, if you are in the law enforcement agencies, you have EAP assistance available to you. Once you retire, it's going to depend on your benefit package for your insurance that you have available, because it is expensive having psychological services if you don't have insurance.
Yes.
So I think that's one step, is to make sure those resources are there and available to law enforcement, that they're able to reach out and to get help.
Okay.
But also, too, it's important for the buddy system.
Accountability buddy.
And at my son's funeral, which was just devastating to me in some ways, I had 2 other Marines come up and hug me and say to me, "I want you to know, Joe talked me out of suicide."
Wow.
And it's like, oh,
yeah,
it just,
anger, sadness.
It's crushed me, because there I am witnessing 2 strong Marines that had their own challenges, and that shouldn't be that way. When they come back from service, we should be doing everything we can. Not a checklist of how you feel about things, but really a strong psychological screening at where they're at.
Maybe even have strong psychological screenings throughout your entire military and even first responders too. In entire
Absolutely.
careers, you should have, every quarter you should be going to talk to a mental health professional.
What happens is, for law enforcement hiring, all the departments psychologically screen law enforcement, but generally, unless there's an observed problem or referral to internal affairs, they're not going back to the psychologist unless they may serve on a special team like SWAT. Some of the agencies, every year psych their people. But I think that's needed. We need to make those efforts to keep check on the individuals.
They work. They work. They're proven to work, and people are going to resist it, obviously. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing everything we can to help people who don't even know they need the help. And that's just, it's kind of, but at the end of the day, it's the same people making policy have their own issues. And the same people that are trying to set things up to help other people have their own issues. So what I think is that there's just a lot of crosstalk, and there's not enough actual action being done. There's a lot of theory out there. There's a lot of, this is what needs to get done, this needs to get done. But there's not enough, veteran counseling, veterans who are actually going out there and advising people and talking about suicide and talking about what's going on and creating campaigns around that. And I think the more that we see it in front of ourselves and in our faces every day, in our news feeds, on the television, on the radio, on podcasts, the more people are going to go, what are we doing? When are we going to do something? And I do believe that it's coming, and I do believe that it's starting to shift, where people are realizing how important mental health is.
And we need every citizen to know that on a daily basis, 20 to 22 veterans take their lives. And what, to me, is just so unfortunate is that when I, see civilians that I'm talking to, and they say to me, I never knew that many veterans killed themselves.
Still.
Yeah, it's a hidden secret that can no longer be hidden.
And just, along with first responders, along with veterans, suicide in general, in the youth, in the elder populations, in the middle-aged populations, it's through the roof in the last 10, 15 years. So mental health issues, they don't start and end with veterans and first responders. It's an epidemic across our entire country, but and across our entire world. Yes. Japan is seeing suicide rates unlike anything that's ever been even closely or remotely recorded. And there has to be something to this, but people don't want to talk about it. It's not cat videos.
Yes, and it's the dirty little word, suicide. And you'll even see people when I say that my son committed suicide, they kind of want to turn like, ooh.
Taboo. We can't talk about that.
But we need to talk about it.
We didn't talk about religion, politics, or finances for 40 years, and look where we're at right now. So maybe we got to start talking about the things that people don't want to talk about.
Yes.
And we got to have open dialogue conversations where people can come together and go, this is what I'm going through, this is what other people are going through, this is what we need. But if we can't be our own advocates and we don't tell anybody what's going on in our lives, how can we help? So initially we got to just remove the stigma right now, where it's not even mental health issues, it's just mental health. Depression is a normal human emotion. Anxiety is normal human reaction. It's a symptom of underlying issues. Mm-hmm. And we are in a society that still doesn't want to talk about what's really going on. They want to talk about the weather. They want to talk about the football game. But when I ask somebody, how are you? I really mean, how are you? What is happening in your life? Because I am intrigued as to know what's going on and if there's any way I can provide value to you. But the thing is that most people go, how are you? More, it's a novelty. And I think that changing the conversation that we have in this country is important, and it's the first step into really affecting change in every other aspect.
Adam, I think that's so true, because I think most people at some point in their life feel depression.
Absolutely.
And it's a feeling that you don't feel like yourself either. You feel like a different person. I can tell you that I was depressed after my son, and still now I am too, after committing suicide, and it changes you. You don't remain the same. And that becomes a little scary too, because you got to be reflective of yourself and realize that you're not the same person.
And that's
You've been through a set of horrific experiences being in the military and with some people being in law enforcement. And it's okay.
Yep.
And that we understand that.
Absolutely. So what are some of the other organizations and resources that Veterans Counseling Veterans is supporting, working alongside, believes in? Can you give us a little more information on other organizations and resources?
If you wouldn't mind, Adam, I'd like to defer to the CEO of Veterans Counseling Veterans, who is here today because he supports our veterans.
Bring it up.
To come up. This man is incredible.
So Tony, tell us a little bit about some of the organizations and resources that Veterans Counseling Veterans are supporting, working alongside, and anything that you have planned in the future with.
Yeah, so one of the things that's very important, because I think we learned this in the military, about working collectively.
Yes.
The power is not individual. The power is in the collective force.
Mm-hmm.
And for what we do, we actually are partnered with the Florida Mental Health Council Association. In fact, next Friday we're going to be supporting their annual conference by having a military sexual trauma symposium in support of that.
Wow.
I'm also partnered with the local, it's called Suncoast Mental Health Council Association. I'm also working with the Hillsborough County Commissioners.
Yes.
I'm the sub-chair. They have a committee for veterans suicide prevention. So I'm on the sub-chair for training for that committee. We're also partnered with, we work a lot with the Florida Suicide Prevention Coalition.
Yes.
And we're going to be presenting at their annual conference on 19th of March in Tallahassee. Carol's going to be part of that group. Well, again, one of the things we're really trying to push is the awareness part about post-vention, because nobody's talking about it. So we're really pushing that this year. One of our main goals for Veterans Council Veterans to push the awareness of post-vention. So Carol will be part of that. And there's like 3 or 4 mothers that are part of our program that have lost their sons to suicide. So they'll be presenting there so that the state knows about it. We also, and May the 22nd, we have a special memorial for families who lost veterans to suicide. It's our 5th year in a row doing this. Normally have a post 5, and that one is a safe space. Basically, what we just talked about. When you come to that event, it's a safe net because everybody is focused on you. They know about you. They've been through what you went through. So if somebody asks you, "How did your son pass?" You're not feeling whatever, or sometimes don't feel like they deserve whatever. So that ceremony is very important. That ceremony is just the same as a memorial ceremony. So we have color guards. We have McDill supports us a lot. So the last 4 years, McDill has always sent out a chaplain as well. So we get support with those guys. This upcoming event that we're doing on May 18th, we actually have support from McDill. We're going to have support from the Coast Guard. St. Pete, we're going to support from the VA. I've got commitments from the Chief of Mental Health, Dr. Conlano, and his VA chaplain that they have, and also one of the local celebrities that we have. Her name is Linda Pugsley. She's really well known in this area here. She's going to be part of that event. So that's something that when you have that many diverse people coming together, that means that is something that is at a human level that everybody agrees on. So those are the many events. We also provide training. We have a trainer that trains and assists on Safe Talk, which is an approved training program, suicide prevention. We provide training for that once a quarter. So we got one coming up in March for the training.
Okay, cool.
So we do a lot when it comes to the community.
You've been doing, it's so crazy to see how much it's grown in just a year from last time, because you were probably the 3rd or 4th episode I recorded, and now the first one back here again in a year. You've just done so much work, and I'm so proud of everything you're doing, and I really thank you for dedicating your life to helping veterans, especially veterans who deal with suicide, thinking about suicide, or who are families that have actually gone through it. So thank you so much, Tony.
I want to also recognize, we also have Carlos Garcia. I want to recognize Carlos.
Dr. Carlos Garcia.
Member, so it's a community, and I think I appreciate it. One thing I do have is the nonprofit CEO. I got to mention, we definitely need sponsors.
Yes.
As we get into that realm of all these programs that we have, we know we need sponsors, we need donors. So just let you know that. But I'll tell you what, and these guys can attest to it. We put some money to work.
Yes.
So you can believe that.
You'll be able to see everything on vettingamerica.com, on the Tampa Post, on these interviews. All the links will be provided. Thank you so much for coming on, Tony, for a real quick cameo. And we're going to get back to the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So how can the Vetting America community help support Veterans Counseling Veterans and VFOS?
Well, one of the things is you having your organization participate in
Yes,
our forum
I'm
May
excited.
18th. And we welcome other veterans out there. Please go to our website, Veterans Counseling Veterans, for the location of it. We're working on it, and it should be out in about a week or so.
Awesome. I'll definitely push it to all my channels, and hopefully if anybody viewing at home, May 18th, the place where it's going to be is being set in stone this week.
Yes.
And it's going to be a great mental health forum for veteran suicide prevention, as well as, what's it called?
Post-vention.
Post-vention, okay.
Yes. And Adam, I just want to commend you, because I know a little bit about your own personal story as a U.S. Marine, for you to take this on, to
Thank
get the
you.
word out about it. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
I would say, for me, there was nothing left but this, in a way. It was weird. It was either kind of, check out or truly check in. And I decided that life's too beautiful for me to let
Yes.
certain times in my life that aren't dictate the rest of it. And so I said, if I have an issue, why not try to fix it within myself while also helping others fix it within themselves? And I just decided to do whatever I thought I could, and so I really appreciate you saying that, because it means a lot to me.
Well, you're a perfect example about transition.
Yes.
Because you've taken on another mission, and this is a tough mission to take on.
Yes.
And I think it's important, too, for other veterans out there to recognize that it can be done.
Service, I was so lonely after getting out. I isolated. I pushed the government away. I pushed veterans away. I pushed the veteran community away, the military, and it was so lonely, and I was isolated, and I was trying to just make money, and it just wasn't fulfilling. I didn't have a purpose. And then all of a sudden, when I started to serve again, all of a sudden the familiar feeling of fulfillment came back to me, and that's what I'm trying to push out into the veteran community now, especially those who are struggling. Is whether you believe it or not, you served. That's all you
Yes.
did. You served other people, you served commanders, you served your troops, you served your friends, you served, and all of a sudden you take that away, and it's literally a foundational principle of who you are, of your character. Now you no longer have that. That's where the emptiness starts from. And if you don't continue to serve to fill your soul, you're going to continue to struggle, because you're going to be purposeless. And that being said, one of my favorite ways to end my show is I always ask people, if you could give a sage piece of advice to a transitioning military member or even a first responder, especially being 25 years in the sheriff's office of Pinellas County, and then on top of that, being a mother of a Marine veteran who committed suicide, what would you give that sage piece of advice based in?
To recognize that you have a coat of armor on when you leave the military or you leave law enforcement, whether police or fire. And you need to shed that, and to really be reflective and understand that you have accomplished so much by serving, and you've learned so many things. And while you may feel that you don't fit in at this point, there are places that would welcome you fitting in, but you got to take that step forward and communicate to others, and reach out and say, hey, I need a little bit of help here to get started, whether it's through contacting veterans, counseling veterans. I know we would welcome volunteers from the military to join our organization and volunteer with us, just so that they start feeling like they have a home and that they have direction. And understand, it's not an easy transition for either occupations, and it takes time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Carol.
Thank you, Adam.
And thanks again for Tony Williams for coming on, talking a little bit about what's going on with Veterans Counseling Veterans this year. I'd like to thank our sponsors once more, Anthony Kovic of the Tampa Post, Angel Francisco of S Marketing, and of course the Attic Cafe for hosting us today. Another beautiful day, start of season 2. Love Tampa, Florida. I love what I got going on down here. I'm so proud of all these people I get to meet that are doing really great things for not only the veteran community, but the American community. And I'm hoping that at some point we could take this across the world because veteran mental health is just one aspect of the mental health challenge that our entire culture, our human species culture, is going through right now. And together we can definitely do something to thwart this. But thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys again next week, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.